Fiscal Court. And call the roll, Madam Clerk, please.
Commissioner Bartleman?
Here.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Parker?
Here.
Judge Clymer?
Here. And Commissioner Bartleman, would you offer a prayer for us, please?
Let us pray. Father, we just thank you for the blessings of this day. We thank you for the opportunity and the freedom you give us in this country, Father, to celebrate and do things as we please. Father, we're just so thankful that we have the opportunity to serve this community. We just pray you be with us as we make decisions tonight, as we debate issues, as we look to the future to make this a better place to call home. Father, we pray for our first responders, our sheriff's deputies, our police officers, firefighters, ambulance workers, and others, Father, as they work to protect this community. Just give them the safety they need. Father, we're so thankful for what you do for us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. And stand and join us in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to see if someone would make a motion that we vary from the agenda and go directly to our PVA discussion, our omitted
So moved.
text.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. So we have here today the benefit of Mr. Tom Crawford has joined us. He's the director of the Division of Local Evaluation for the Kentucky Department of Revenue. I gave him notice Friday at about maybe 4 o'clock or so, I think, with a letter. 5 o'clock every time. I thought you might point that out, that we were going to be discussing that. And he dropped everything and came down here, and I think brought maybe a couple other folks with him as well, our regional representative, and he'll identify who he has with him. But so we're going to have the benefit of his viewpoint on our situation. Just in a nutshell, we have discovered, Bill Dunn, I guess really our current PVA discovered that we have quite a problem with the fact that our property, real property in the county, has not been evaluated as it's required to have been by law by the prior PVA. Many millions of dollars worth of property either underassessed or completely omitted from the tax rolls. I think we have a handle on the underassessed. That's going to be addressed as time rolls on. Those properties are being reassessed, but the real problem that we're dealing with is the omitted properties, which means that this property has never been on the tax rolls. And a typical example is a person has a lot, a piece of ground, and they build one or more homes, a barn, whatever, a garage. We have commercial buildings of $1 million or more that have been built and just several years ago and never were put on the tax rolls. And so the taxing districts, the county, the school, the fire, all the districts, library, did not receive any revenue as they should have. And so we're trying to get a handle on that as the fiscal court. And all of that falls really under the Department of Revenue, and Mr. Crawford being the director, and I think the representative for us can shed a lot of light. I've talked with him here just for 15 or 20 minutes a little while ago. I think we're getting a good handle on things, but we're going to address this in open session. We think it's valuable for people to get the input, not only our view, but Department of Revenue. And I think there's, I don't know that we've found anything that at least I disagree with as to their viewpoint and how we go forward and that sort of thing. And so we'll just open it up here and have Mr. Unless does anybody else want to make any statement or anything before we call him up? So we'll ask Mr. Crawford, the Director of the Division of Local property evaluation to get us up to speed.
Well, thank you, Judge, and thank you, members of the Fiscal Court. I'm glad to be here tonight to talk about this important issue. I don't really have a formal presentation for you. As he said, I've only found out about it a little while ago, this morning. Actually, I didn't check my email over the weekend for once. So anyhow, I really just want to focus on the efforts that we are trying to implement to correct this issue. When the PVA, Mr. Dunn, brought it to our attention, it was shocking, and I'm disappointed. And we want to take every effort that we can to correct this issue. So I think the judge and I had a phone conversation some time ago, and I committed to him then that in October we would have 2 or 3 of our field staff members I've envisioned coming down and helping the PVA with his field work to get this problem corrected. I have since been informed that the PVA has granted some remote access, is that the right term, Bill? Remote access to his tax roll, so that if a field rep of mine is working in a different county and they finish up their work in that county and they still have 2 or 3 hours left in the day, they don't have to drive to Paducah to come and work on the issues that we have here in McCracken County. They can remotely access Bill's tax roll from any other workstation that they happen to be at. That's going to save a lot of time. So rather than driving home and going home early, they're going to be able to work on the work there in a different county, that they can do so they can get this done as quickly as possible. We've already had some preliminary work. I think we have Wayne Benningfield is the field rep that's assigned to McCracken County. He has already done some preliminary work. I know our branch manager, her name is Martha Tapley. She is going to be meeting with Bill next week to formalize a plan of action so that we know which areas of the county we need to concentrate on first, and then second, and so on and so forth. And she's had many phone conversations with Bill as well over these issues. And I believe there's a couple of other field reps that Bill has graciously granted access to his system as well. So we feel like we certainly do not have a handle on it yet, but we're going to get a handle on it very soon to see what the extent of the problem is and get those assessments to where they need to be.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time, particularly on not too much advance notice. I find myself trying to get things done. I intended to give you more notice,
no.
But I gave you like a 4-page letter, I
yep.
think, to outline everything. And so we can go about it however. You have questions like that?
Can you just give us at least the 1,000-foot view on how to handle how the omitted properties will be handled? You were talking about earlier in our brief conversation that there's a form for the sheriff and
yes.
others. Can you kind of explain
yes.
that? I think it's important
omitted
for the public to
properties
know that.
typically have, of course, a tax amount, then a penalty amount, with the statutes allow for either a 10% penalty if the property is voluntarily listed with the property valuation administrator by the property owner, or if it's involuntarily listed by the property owner, the penalty would be 20% based upon the tax amount. Then on top of that, there's interest at what we call the tax interest rate. It's based on the bank prime rate. Every year it's adjusted by the Department of Revenue, and it's running at the 4%, 5%, 6% range over the last several years. That would also be added to the amount due of an omitted tax bill. But there is a statute that allows the Commissioner of Revenue to authorize a waiver of a penalty to be considered on a different different types of property tax bills. And in the last several years, that authority has been delegated to the county attorney, county clerk, and the sheriff, because they are the collectors on behalf of the Department of Revenue for the state portion of the tax bills. And they know their taxpayers better than we do, sitting in Frankfurt. So we have delegated that authority to consider penalty waivers to those 3 local officials as they collect property taxes. And certainly they can always consult with the Department of Revenue if they have one that they're not sure about.
Clarify, my understanding was the statute had a 1% interest penalty per month. And was there something in the statute at one time, like, for example, be 12% a year?
That's
Was
that's
that repealed?
interest on a delinquent tax bill
Okay.
that runs at 1% a month or 12% a year. That may be what you're thinking about,
Okay,
Bill.
so this would not be a delinquent tax bill?
No,
if
no.
it was- Okay.
No, I mean, they certainly
good to know,
could
too.
be, but initially, they're going to be just a straight-up omitted property tax bill with a certain amount of time to pay the amount due, and if it goes delinquent, then it's subject to those penalties that you're
Okay,
talking about.
okay. So that'd be on top of the
Yeah,
interest? and on
absolutely.
top of the-
Yes, sir.
And from our conversation, there's there's the ability to waive the penalty, but the interest cannot be waived.
The
Is that
interest cannot
correct?
be waived, no, sir.
Okay. And this goes back 5 years, is that right?
The omitteds can go up to 5 years, yes, sir.
You said go up to 5 years.
Well,
Can it-
if the property was built, let's say a new house was constructed and say in 2018, we're not going to go back 5 years, we're just going to go
Okay.
back 1. But if it's built in 2014, then we would go back the full 5.
Right, but it couldn't go back before that. Well, I think one of the issues the PVA has found that maybe a year or two ago, they found some omitted property, and I'm not sure this is exactly correct, but they put the omitted property on the tax rolls, but they didn't charge them interest or taxes back 5 years. Are we required to go back if something was omitted, say, for 3 years, but it's been on the tax roll for 2? Can we go back for those first 3 years to collect the?
So you're saying that the property was built 5 years ago, was put on the tax roll 2 years ago?
Right. And am I correct that Bill, that there were some that the previous PVA did not assess the taxes for the full 5 years? Can we go back on those now that for the first 3 or?
All right, I'm going to preface this, I'm not a lawyer, Bill, but I guess you could, but I would want to confirm that with either the county attorney or our legal staff as well.
Okay.
Because we've already moved on, it seems like we've already got them on the tax roll and moved on, but I don't know if there's any statute of limitations on putting it on an omitted bill.
Right.
I don't want to fully
Okay.
commit to that.
Okay. But we couldn't arbitrarily say you only have to pay 2 years
No,
if it's
no.
been out there 5
If it's been on there, if it's been in existence for 5 years, the law says you need to go back for 5 years.
Okay. Okay, but that's an open question then. It would appear that you could go back and collect the full, but
That's
Yeah.
just off the top of my head,
Yeah.
but I don't
we
want
have
to
get
commit to that.
confirmation of that. Let me ask you this, we as a fiscal court this year are coming up with a legislative agenda, things that we need passed to help government move a little more smoothly than what it does at times. Is there any legislation that needs to be done to prevent issues from this happening, to provide additional oversight? I mean, you've got 120 counties and thousands and thousands and thousands of properties and 120 different PVAs to deal with, but is there any legislation that could be suggested to try to prevent these things from happening
Sure.
again?
Full funding for PVA offices. I'll put them plug for that. They need more money, or you give me some more money and I can hire some more people too.
Boy, didn't see that coming.
You set that one up for me, Bill. Thank you.
I knew that's what the answer would be, because we knew that before, because I guess probably every PVA office is underfunded.
Absolutely. Yes, they are.
I know this would never happen, but would there be any, would it help if maybe some PVA offices were merged together and you had?
I'm not going to go there. No comment.
By your no comment, I know what the answer is. That's all I have right now.
So I guess black and white, I mean, I've talked to people and I've had people call and get ill and say, I've talked to PVAs in different counties and they do it this way or they do it that way. But black and white, we have to go back 5 years, or ever how many years it had been on the tax roll, up to 5 years.
Yes, sir.
And we have to charge the interest, and then we have local authority here with the sheriff or the county court clerk or the county attorney that can waive the 10 or 20%.
You got some
That's
discretion.
black and white. That's the law. That's
yes,
state
sir.
law. That's the way it is.
Yes, sir. You have some discretion on the penalties, but if they call me, that's the answer they get.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
It's pretty clear that way.
Yes, sir.
So do you know who's been designated from McCracken County? You listed 3 possible folks.
Oh, do I know who is?
Yeah, what if the three of them don't agree? I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out who's
Agree on what?
the penalty, the waiver of the
Well, they're not
penalty.
going to be, that's not their decision. They're going to be here, my people are here to assess the property, whether it's been on the tax roll and just grossly underassessed.
I'm sorry.
Or if it's omitted from the tax roll, we're going to help the PVA with assessments of those properties.
You listed the sheriff, the county clerk, or the county attorney might be delegated by the commissioner of revenue to waive the penalty.
Said they were delegated.
They
right?
are.
They are.
They already are.
Okay, my
They
question
already
is-
have that authority.
All three of them are delegated? So
It depends on the time, the collection schedule. Right now, are tax bills out in McCracken County for 2019?
No.
No.
Okay. Well, when they go out, the sheriff is the sole collector of those tax bills at that time. And then in January, penalties become part of the tax bill. You have a 5%, and then it goes to 21%. Since the sheriff is the sole collector of the bills at that time, the sheriff has the responsibility or the authority to waive the penalty. But when it goes delinquent, after it's transferred from the sheriff to the county clerk's office, then you have the sheriff's fees on there, clerk fees are added on there, county attorney fees are added on there. So all three of them have a say in what's going to be waived at that time.
So the first decider of this issue is the sheriff.
Yes, correct.
And the sheriff can say no penalty on the omitted tax returns.
Well, I'm assuming the bills will be prepared with a penalty, but then he can decide, or you may have to have more than the sheriff for these omitted tax bills. This is going to be a big issue for you guys. You may have to have, we'll have to have some sort of procedure to follow to figure out whether or not a penalty waiver is justified from case by case.
Yeah.
Well, and then you told me when we were talking a little bit earlier that there's an administrative regulation that provides a list of categories that are to be considered in making this determination of whether a penalty should be assessed from, I guess 0 to 10% on the self-reported properties, from 10 to 20 on the non-volunteer, the discovered properties, or I guess it could even be on the ones that are not reported. That could even be waived or go below the 10.
It's possible.
But there's a checklist, and so
Yeah. The regulation, like the judge said, has a series of reasons why you can consider a penalty waiver for a particular taxpayer, and I'm going to get that information to you.
And then I guess that kind of brings up the question of so the sheriff. If the sheriff says, in his opinion, I've looked at these regulations, I've looked at this checklist, and just for argument purposes says, I think there should be no penalty on any of these properties. Is that it? Does he have
Well,
final authority, or do we have some?
The memo we sent out to the sheriffs, clerks, and county attorneys was basically for what I call regular tax bills. We have the normal 5% or 21% penalty on there. I'm not sure is the sheriff here? Okay. I'm not going to make the sheriff totally responsible for these omitted tax bill penalty waivers. I don't think that's fair to the sheriff, to be honest. I think we probably have to have some sort of, I don't hate to have a committee or whatever, but I think there has to be some sort of, if we can, as cut and dried guidelines as you can to get make it no question about whether or not a penalty waiver should be granted in this case.
Okay, and so who then would
Well,
make that?
I'll volunteer our legal staff to help the county attorney, work with you with the fiscal court to come up with some sort of guidelines to see if it's possible to do something like that.
Okay. So we have some discretion to develop. We take the checklist and say, I don't know, as a general rule, if we think say there's 10 of them and 5 of them would indicate that a penalty would be appropriate, or 6 or whatever.
Right.
Then that would be at least our guideline.
The guidelines will give you that are already in place will give you a good idea, a good starting point. I think there might be the all-inclusive other category, but that may be, there always is something like that. So that's where we may have to come up with some more specific information for this particular case. But
I'm glad, frankly, there is an other category, because it sounds like we fit there. I mean, I think we're all ready to acknowledge this is government performance, at least at a disappointing level.
yes,
And it's just hard for, I don't know that I have any say or we have any say. I can't, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Do we have any say in
as to
this,
whether or not to
as whether or not this taxpayer gets a penalty or
right,
not?
and that's what I need to get some legal advice on that as well. But again, I will get the guidelines, the regulation actually to you, and I'll talk to my legal counsel tomorrow.
To the degree that this commissioner has any say, it seems to me this is a situation where no taxpayer should get a penalty unless governments perform properly and give it a bright line.
Okay.
It just doesn't make sense to me to penalize unless there's no bright line.
Okay.
And I suspect we all kind of feel that way.
Yeah. Well, what we can do is we get that regulation and see what that is. We're going to have, as I told Mr. Crawford, we're going to have extremes at both ends. People who, we got the communication from the person who claims to have talked to the former PBA 1 year and said, hey, I've got a house and it's not on the rolls, please put it on there. It didn't get put on second year. Hey, you never did give me a tax bill last year, didn't get one this year either. So that's an extreme case in favor of the taxpayer. And then we've got maybe on the other extreme a quite sophisticated person or business that certainly, I think, would have known, certainly should have known that they weren't paying taxes on $1 million property, and that's at the other extreme. Do we throw them all in the same boat and just say we're just going to go forward with no penalty, or and those things will develop? But I would not personally be prepared to say we're just not going to do any. But I get your point that this was a strong example of poor government, and so I think we give some deference to the taxpayers on that. One point, and I didn't ask you, Mr. Crawford, I don't know if you know the answer right now, but the statutes provide that it's the duty of the property owner to report, the language is significant improvements to their property, such as a house, such as $1 million building sitting on a whatever $20,000 piece of ground. But I'm not aware of any. My wife handles all my financial stuff, so I'm kind of ignorant about all this, to be frank about it. But I don't know of a mechanism by which, and I think when I talked to Bill Dunn about it, he was saying it's exceedingly rare for a person to just come into his office and say, hey, I've built this house and I need you to assess it so I can pay taxes, and we're humans. How much grief are we going to go to try to get the government to tax us?
Right.
And so we may be running into that, but so I don't know if that mechanism. Do you? I forget the statute number. It's in the 132 chapter, but that puts the onus on the property owner to report. Is there some mechanism by which a property owner should know that they have to do that? And in my letter to you, I talked about, I think I meant that I think that it's likely that we could come to a conclusion that if a person didn't actually report, hey, I got a house and I want it to be assessed, but they went and got the building permit, they subdivided the ground, they got their electrical, their plumbing, whatever kind of permits you got to have, I can see the possibility that we would consider that, if nothing else, self-reporting, even though the communication broke down somewhere along the way, that if a person went through the steps where they reasonably should think, why in the heck did I not, am I being accused of not reporting my house when I did everything that otherwise that I'm supposed to do? Is there some mechanism where a form somebody's supposed to send in to the PVA or anything like that?
I believe electrical inspectors are supposed, well, I thought they were supposed to send in those reports to PVAs. Bill told me earlier this afternoon that that's just for cities of the first class, but so they may not be that requirement any longer. You're right. The statutes say the taxpayer is supposed to list their property every year, and hardly anybody does. But the statute goes on to say that if it's described completely incorrectly on the previous year's tax roll and there's been no changes made, then that's the listing as well for the property owner. That keeps them in line with the statute. And also if it's been sold during the year and the PVA uses the deed price as stated in that transfer, then that is also the listing of the property owner for that particular year. But that's not the case when it's omitted or it's been substantially changed. But the statute goes on to say that even if the taxpayer has not or property owner has not listed the property, nevertheless the property valuation administrator shall assess the property. And so there is a dual responsibility. The property owners have a responsibility, but the PVA is elected to do a job, and the statute acknowledges that by saying that they are supposed to go out and assess the property. And I would tend to agree with you that if the PVA is getting a building permit or some other notification from another governmental agency that the property owner had gone through to build that house, that's probably notification in my mind as well.
You know, just one point, Bill, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I sent you a question this afternoon. I think it's important that we understand it and the public understand it. I think you said there's $7 million of omitted property identified so far. And of that $7 million in omitted property, if we boil it down, how much money would actually end up in the general fund of county government? And that number was
the gross assessment right now is about $700 if I calculated it correctly. I calculated it on the fly, but it was about $7.5 million omitted right now. Of course, the gross tax revenue is 1% of that, and out of that, anyway, the county would receive, again, if I did it right, about $700.
not even enough to hire another deputy jailer for a month.
Right.
I just think that's important to keep in perspective as far as this is not going to generate. This is not a money maker.
Not for us, but it would be for the school districts.
Right.
But if you go back several years, it is a money maker. That's where your problem lies. This didn't happen in 24 overnight.
I'm not saying
it over several years. So if you compound it several years, then it comes up to be quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
Well, $3,500, right? I mean, isn't that what
Right.
it's
Right.
That's just 5 years.
But that's just,
Go
and
back
that's
10
just
or
the
12,
county.
15.
Your question is just the county, right?
That's just what the county. I'm not saying that we ignore it or anything like that. I'm just saying it's not the solution to other money problems that we're going to talk about later.
Mm-hmm. Well, and of course, you know, there is the matter of fairness that comes to play as well. You could say fairness in that we're penalizing people because the PVA didn't do the job, but there's also the aspect on the backside of that there's a lot of people out there that have been paying their taxes as they should have, and that these properties were omitted at some point. Again, I don't handle that stuff myself, but when you start fleshing all that out, it would seem that the $1 million business property, or we told me to go about it, well, you can get details, but there's a lot of places where they built several houses on one lot, apartments on one lot, professional people, fairly sophisticated people that know that year after year after year, they never received any tax increase for that property that went valued from, say, $10,000 for the ground to $400, you know, $1 million. And so there are people out there that were paying theirs, and
sure,
that's a consideration too.
I agree, and I think that the net effect of that is, if I'm understanding all of this correctly is that none of this would have increased what actually ended up in our general fund, with the exception of maybe $700, but it would have potentially decreased what other people paid into. So, I mean, it's essentially maybe some people are paying more than their fair share of taxes because properties have not been reassessed.
That's exactly right.
You're saying 1% is about what the county should see on.
Yeah, for a property in the county, not in the annex, not in the city, in the county, it's just a rule of thumb that we use.
That would be 1% into our general fund, of what, that 7
Well,
million?
we say 1%. We say 1%. The taxpayer is going to pay 1% of their assessment will be their tax bill. The county gets a portion of that.
Yeah, the 1%, it's like 1.01 or something, but 1% as a general rule is for all the taxing districts, including the county.
That's right.
1%
And so
of
1%
7 million
is
is
7 million.
70,000, yeah.
Yeah, there's $70,000 in tax dollars, of which most of that's going to go to the school system.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And so they're standing right now at 7,070,000, and if that was extrapolated for, if it happened to be that case for 5 years, 350. And I mean, can you even guess at how far along you are? I mean, have you done 10% of the county, or?
Well, that's a statement I hate to make. You know, the way I viewed this last week is I've been here for 1 year now. I should be able to look over a calendar year and see that I'm 25% through the county, because we do this in quadrennials, 4-year reviews. So the way I look at it, I should be able to look over the calendar year and see that I'm 25% through the county. I calculated it last week when I had this thought, and we're only 11% through the county. That's because it's very, very time-consuming work, and we don't have enough people. So
then if you extrapolate that out, we're at a tenth.
Yeah.
Of course, properties, you know, there could be a $5 million property out here or something that'll skew the whole thing, but just on that general basis, it'd be more like 10 times the, what did we say, 70,000? No.
Yeah.
Is that?
1% of 7 million. 7 million is 11%. So really,
Yeah.
if you look at it that way, you're looking at
So 70,000 times
10.
times 10, 700,000, and times 5 is 3.5
million.
million that we're looking at. If that, of course, it won't be that. It could be a lot more, could be less, but that's not
That's
something.
sizable. I bet the school district like to have a big part of that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that presumes that you keep finding the same ratio of omitted property.
it has slowed down the last 2-3 weeks. We haven't received any phone calls, haven't found anything, although we did find 2 today.
I have a question regarding the timeline. On the omitted property, can you send out a tax bill whenever you find that, or is there a time when you have to do that?
Well, first step is to send a notice to the top property owner of
that be
the
any time
omitted
during the
assessment.
year?
Huh?
Can that be any time during the year?
It can be any time during the year, yes, sir.
Okay.
So you send a notice, and you have to give them some time to have a conference with the PVA, and if they can reach an agreement on the assessed value, great. If not, if the taxpayer has an option to file an appeal in the county clerk's office, and you have to have a special called meeting of the local board of assessment appeals to hash that out. And they can go on to the state level if they want to, and they can go to the court if they want to. So, but like I said, it can happen at any time during the year, and if it's an assessment that's agreed upon, you can probably get a tax bill out within a month or so after you've had the omitted assessment.
So if you did all this, say in March, you found it and came to an agreement, you could send a tax bill out in March for the previous 5 years.
It'd probably be April or May, but yes, for the previous 5 years, yes, sir.
Okay.
And those bills can go out as they're discovered.
As the assessments are agreed upon, no further appeal process is available, then those tax bills can immediately go out and they're collectible in the sheriff's office.
Do you know if we have, I don't know, I say the fiscal court, would we have the authority to arrange a payment method for these taxes? For example, some people, it'd be hard if they got a $12,000 tax bill for the last 5 years.
Right.
Do we have the authority to somehow work out a payment plan?
I don't know. I know the sheriff is authorized, he could take partial payments, but that doesn't, there's no specificity to that. I don't know if you can separately have an ordinance that would allow for a payment plan to be in place up front. I would just have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
And that's one of the discussions we had had, and something that Mr. Doolittle and the county attorney and I have been talking about some is we, given that it's really a lack of a government office doing the job that caused all this, that we want to give some leeway to the taxpayers, and as a former judge, I know that there are companies out there that will, let's say, assess a penalty or even just the tax on a person, and they can't pay it right now. We want to try to make that lien that's going to be placed against their home if they don't pay it on time unattractive to the people that are out there that buy up these tax liens and then foreclose on the home after they assess massive attorney fees, costs, whatever. And so that's one thing we'd like to try to find the answer to as well, is we might decide that we would like to recapture some of that money, but not to the extent that it would put somebody out of their home.
Sure.
Or in risk of losing
Right.
their home, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Give deference.
I know Mr. Lancaster's here,
Yes.
too, came in late, so we appreciate you being here.
He's had a long day. He was in Johnson County this morning, the other end of the state.
Appreciate you coming down, too.
Did y'all have?
So we don't have, as a court, have a whole lot of authority over what happens. I mean, it's cut and dried through state statute.
That's true. I mean, in that respect, you're right.
Let me, you've had this level of a problem in any other counties in the last few years?
No, sir.
Another question, I don't know if you can answer this or not. PVAs have to have a performance bond.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I think it's a $50,000 performance bond. Would it be possible to try to cash that bond and use that bond proceeds to maybe help fund some of the extra help we need to get caught up?
You're getting a little bit out of my area. Do you know, Joe?
I don't know. No, performance bond is for liabilities, but I don't know about helping a taxpayer directly. That's where I would, if it were reimbursing the office.
Well, I'm not sure you're not saying a taxpayer directly. Are you saying that we use the money to help with the program here?
Maybe to help
fund
fix the problem.
an employee or some software or whatever to help?
Yeah, or bring 10 people in for 3 months to
Right, exactly.
get beyond the 11%.
Right, right.
We will look into that because that's
I think that's something
I
we,
would say it's a probability, but.
again, as I understand it, we don't have any say on that. It's a state bond with the state, so I think we'd request that you take a look at that.
Sure.
And if those proceeds could be used to help deal with our problem, because, again, if it's taken a year to get 11%,
Right.
by the time he gets 15%, he's already going to be behind from the first 11. So if you could take a look at that, we'd appreciate that.
I'm not sure that the performance bond, I don't know the answer, but I was under the impression that it would be for the full, faithful performance of the job, and it would cover up to the $50,000 for the lack of the performance, the poor performance. And I suspect that was done every term. The former PVA was on the job, or at least over there, for 25 or 30 years.
Yep.
Had maybe 6 or 7 4-year terms, every year probably a $50,000 bond. Of course, I guess that's through an insurance company.
Yeah, that's right.
It's you purchase the bond, I think. You know, Steve, on that, I suspect it might be through an insurance company.
They do deal with insurance companies. I
Yeah.
have seen that, yes.
So we might have 6 or 7 performance bonds if it could show that the performance was contrary to the assurances made in that bond. Go back 25, 30 years.
Well, that'd be nice.
You like that.
I like that.
I would anticipate someone.
He's a former circuit judge, so I think
As an insurance defense lawyer, I would say, well, you haven't been damaged because you get a first priority lien on your county taxes, so all of the entities will still be in the same position of collecting that money once the bill's there, or the equity would be there.
I think the
But I like
damage.
the thought.
I think the damage though is.
I don't like your thought.
I think the damage though is the expense to get caught up. And there's been
Well,
damage because there's been lost revenue. The taxpayers have been harmed, as we discussed.
You got all the taxpayers that have been paying their taxes at a level higher than they should have. You got all the schools getting less money to operate, the library, the fire departments, everybody else. I'd take that on. I mean, I'm not saying I think we ought to do that necessarily, but I think it's.
Maybe you can be a
something to
special
look at.
judge in that case.
Bill, you got anything else while Mr. Crawford's here? Or
Lancaster, you have
Ms.
anything you want to add?
Lancaster, did you?
After driving all that distance, you may want to add something, if you want to come up to the
Well, I don't know
podium.
what Tom has said so far. Tom.
It's all been great.
Johnson County, where is Johnson County? Paintsville.
That's on the other side of Kentucky 80.
We told him he didn't have to come.
Yeah, well, this is definitely a serious moment for the Department of Revenue and Office of Property Valuation. It's a very difficult situation considering the fact that our field folks and Tom and our professionals that work hard with the statistical work that goes on to make this system work across the state. The difficult part becomes, as an elected official, even though a state employee, but a local official that's elected, we are limited in the amount of activity that we can do without the PVA. We can assist the PVA. And we've had budgetary constraints, not only on the PVAs, but also on the system as a whole. So, and of course, in our own staffing. So we can't make promises to come in and do wondrous things to help. But hopefully, we're committed to try to add as much resources as we can through our field staff to try to help, or these type solutions that you've been suggesting. So the department does not like what has happened, but we can't interfere with the elected official, even though sometimes under assessment, sometimes intentional, and sometimes not intentional. We have to be very careful as we deal with the elected officials. So would you say, Tom, that's we're not, they're direct supervisors. We're the supervisors of the system across the state, and each county has that privilege of having the locally elected PVA. However, when these situations occur, which we've had very few, hopefully, over the years, of intentional or just basic, just not doing their job like this, we take it seriously. So we appreciate your seriousness to it, and hopefully we can help Mr. Dunn get his job done.
So what you're telling us is then really there's very little oversight over the job the PVA performs. If he doesn't do his job and he thumbs his nose at you.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Over the system that governs the PVA, that is how we work with the PVA. Now, if the PVA is doing something, basically not providing us information like they're supposed to, or doing their job that way, it's hard for our statistics to catch it in that way. I'm not saying we don't catch it, and no doubt if we do, we're serious about it. But what has happened here is definitely out of the absolute ordinary that I've ever seen in the history.
And I guess it's difficult in this situation for you to have seen red flags in the past. Is that?
Because I don't want to say too much because I'm not an attorney, and that's the difficult part here. But the reality is you have blatant, obviously from the press reports and the investigations, there have been blatant illegalities that we would not have picked up on because the statistics, I guess, in a lot of ways were not maintenanced or told correctly or whatever. So I'm not trying to create liabilities here, but the reality is the PVA is sitting in the regional jail, and so the court has spoken.
Yeah, because that's one question we get a lot. Well, who oversees the PVA? Who makes sure this doesn't happen? And
we oversee the system, and we make sure that everybody, and there are statutes that basically, once we get to a certain point, Tom can explain them very well, but in this particular case, the information, the history, the data was so skewed that it was impossible for our statistics at that point. And unfortunately, it falls on that elected official and the type investigations that have gone on so far.
What should, I guess I'm trying to, as commissioners, what clues should we, or could we, and we weren't there, have looked forward to see, the failure to do assessments? Would it be in that annual year he certifies, here's what your county's worth, if that number's not going up?
If it's not going up the way you think, that's, I'm going to expand on Joe's comments a little bit. Every year there were assessment increases in McCracken County, and sometimes substantial assessment increases in McCracken County.
They're probably following the deed.
Well, possibly, but there was thousands of reassessment notices sent out every year as well.
All right.
But we do have, to go to your point, Mr. Bartleman, assessment sale ratio studies that we conduct every year on every county. But those are only evaluating in McCracken County maybe 200, 300, 400 properties. What was the assessed value in comparison to that sale price for arm's length transactions, not just a family transaction or something like that, but arm's length transactions. And on top of that, we also do a performance audit every 2 years, where we go into the county and we're only selecting 20 residential, 10 farms, and 10 commercial properties every year of properties that have not sold. So it's a limited sample. They're good studies, but they're not perfect. They're not perfect at all. So yes, we do have oversight, but the PVA is the one that's been responsible for assessing property in the county all throughout the state. They're the officials. We do our best with our staff to do these reviews and the assessment sale ratio studies to make sure. But sometimes it surprises us too, especially if there are assessment increases year over year over year in what I would think in alliance with what the markets are, and thousands of reassessment notices are getting sent out. I'm assuming that the whole county is being covered, and that reassessments are being done on a systematic basis. So, you know.
Is there, I assume there's a number reported to you that, all right, this PVA at McClain County or Henderson County or McCracken County, they've done X number of reassessments per month, per quarter, per year?
They don't send a report that tells me that, but I do have what's called a quadrennial inspection plan that's submitted once every 4 years by every PVA, and they outline what they plan to reassess or inspect and reassess each year. So I know what part of the county they're supposed to be in, or what property class, they can do it either way, or what property class they're doing in a particular year. And they give me estimates of the number of parcels that are being reassessed every year or inspected.
The city and the county each pay the PVA a certain amount of money to do the assessments. What portion of their budget is covered by those fees, and how much comes out of the state general fund?
Oh, the general fund by far is more.
Okay.
That's a $50-some-odd million budget from the general fund. But
Is that just for the PVAs?
for the PVA,
Or
yes,
is
sir.
that the whole revenue?
For statewide.
And the deputies.
And, well, for deputy salaries, PVA salaries, and things of that nature. But a substantial portion of their local funds are billed by the Department of Revenue to cover the budgetary shortfalls that they're experiencing that don't cover all the salaries and that type of thing. And then the remaining part is for office expenses and travel, things of that nature.
As I mentioned earlier, we were looking at some issues that we're going to deal with the legislature, and what I was going to bring up is requiring the PVAs to pay rent for the county for their space, but and what you said, I better not do that.
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
We'll be short another person.
I want to make one point. I think maybe clarified the statement that the PVA is in jail at this time, but she is not in jail for failure to perform the job. She's in jail for other things.
Correct.
Fraudulent kind of convictions.
That may still be under investigation, though, whether or not.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that. Just so I understand, I hear the things about oversight and watching different things, but what, in theory, would the Department of Revenue say this was found some time ago, well, or even now, take the situation as it is right now, and let's say the PVA was still on the job, what would the recourse be of the Department of Revenue? You're saying you kind of have to work with the PVA and that person's elected, but does the Department of Revenue have oversight and a procedure where you could get somebody in line?
Yes, sir, we do. If our preliminary studies indicated an issue and we expanded upon those reviews and we definitely believed there was an issue and the PVA failed to cooperate with us and we issued a direct order to the PVA to do X number of reassessments or what have you, and the PVA did not do that, then there are procedures to follow to actually remove the PVA from office.
Of course, that's all moot once the PVA is gone, I assume.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really it, is to remove the person.
Either the PVA needs to cooperate and get on the stick and do the job, or they need to be removed at that point.
Another question. Is each PVA office audited every year? You audit and how they spend their funds?
We do every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
60-60. But
how-
ratio reviews are done every year.
Okay. But you audit how they spent their money and whether or not.
Yeah, there's
Every 2 years.
well, now, the state auditors do that. They do a series of audits every year on a select number of counties. I think they try to get everybody over the course of their term. So once, you probably get subject to a state audit on their fiscal responsibilities once every 4 years.
Yeah, I was just curious why some of the issues that went on that caused her to be in jail, why they weren't caught.
We don't do anything with that. That's the state auditors.
So okay.
I'm sure they appreciate me just saying that.
Thank Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me do say, Bill Dunn, I've worked with him fairly closely, and he's top notch. I think he's real strong in the position. He's being aggressive and trying to get the office where it should be, and we're glad to have him. And these questions about what should have been done, what could be watched for, I have no concern about Bill and his operation.
Well, and
I
as
think
I
we
said
all-
before, we're very pleased with the level of cooperation. I'm thrilled that he's given our field reps remote access to his tax roll so they can help even better and more, well, just in a better way. So I appreciate that very much.
And so one thing that's, just don't beat this horse too bad, but one thing, of course, that he's running into is people thinking, gosh, this new PVA is reassessing my property and it's going up. It's because of all these things we're talking about, and the law is that property has to be assessed at its fair cash value, I think is the term.
That's the term.
And so that's not been done. So in my view, and I tell people when they come to me and say, I can't believe my property's gone up by 25%, and I ask them, well, how long ago did you build that house? Well, about 20 years ago. And I said, well, it's you've gotten away. You've saved a lot of money because you haven't paid that tax. Now you're going to pay what you should have. The whole other community's been paying more because you haven't. So I say, have a nice day.
I always tell my dad when he complains about his assessment, I said, well, would you sell it for that, Dad? He goes, no, I know. I said, well, then you don't have an argument.
I want to echo the judge's comments too, Joe and Tom. We appreciate you coming down here and that drive down the Bluegrass Parkway. I guess you came across 80 maybe from
I know, I came across the mountain park.
Mountain Parkway. We came across 80.
Mountain, Bluegrass, and Western.
Anyway, we appreciate you all coming down and working with us and anything we can do to help. If there's any legislation you want to suggest that we can help to promote, I know we all need more, everybody needs more money, and that's on everybody's agenda, but anything specific to provide a little bit better oversight, we'd be willing to work with our legislative delegation to help with that. Just let us know what we need to do.
That's great. Good to know. Thank you for all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we need you again, I'll try to give you more than an hour.
That's fine. You do whatever.
I didn't do much.
Thanks.
He did all the heavy lifting.
You drove all the way down here, so that can be a task.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate you coming.
Yes.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Oh,
Good luck to you.
had your daughter in class.
well, you may have.
Amy Clymer.
Sure.
Yeah, I had her in class.
Is that right? Well,
Very, very young lady.
thank you.
Absolutely.
So I bet you work in Murray. I mean, you live in Murray.
Well, I did when I became superintendent in Todd County, and I retired about a year and a half
Oh, did
ago. And I started working here about 5 months ago.
Oh, okay.
So they're giving me McCracken. I used to teach here, of course, for 7, 8 years and coached.
Oh,
until-
okay. Yeah. Is that your Murray State church?
Yes, this is my Murray State. I graduated
Oh.
three times from Murray State.
You graduated 3 times.
Yeah,
Well,
bachelor's, 2 masters.
yeah, well, good. Good. Yeah, go Racers.
We sure say hi.
I will. Billy, what is it?
Just call Mr. B.
Mr. B. All right, I'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Appreciate it.
All right, let's see, we've got the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion. I would like to add item, I don't want to take G off of the consent agenda, but I would like to make, in our discussion, talk about item G.
Okay, we'll pull G then.
We don't need a separate vote, but I just want to be able to talk about them.
Okay, well, you want to do that at this time then?
Well, sure. Yeah, we can do
We'll remove it from the consent agenda. Let's get the other things approved and then we'll talk about that. Any motion to approve all but G?
So made.
it. Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. So while we're on it, the G is it?
Yes, that's the treasurer's financial statement for the month of September. So I did want to highlight a couple of things for, I guess, this court and the public. One of which is, I guess I've committed to talk about the state prisoner income for as often as I'm allowed. I'll be 30 seconds or less. We're still under budget. We should be at 25%. We're at 18%. If we keep on this pace, instead of bringing in 4.4 million, we'll bring in 3.5 million, which is about an $800,000 deficit, which I think will be difficult given our small $30 million budget. The one other comment I thought worthy of noticing and making public comment about is that our cash balance in our general fund for the end of September, for September 30th, was $436,000, which is the lowest it's ever been in an October. I don't know, based upon your graph, it's the lowest, you told us the lowest it had been was 800,000, which was last year.
The number I wanted you to pay attention to is the combined general, jail, sheriff, and road funds, because that is the truest measure of our liquidity and net out debt service, transit room tax, and ED funds. And so the combined number is 1.5 and some change, which is the third lowest out of the last 9 years, and a little bit better than last year.
Okay, well, I guess I misunderstood. So you want us to, those three numbers on the cash balance, that's what was low last year, and we're not as low as last year. Not yet.
Not quite as low. We're performing a little bit better the last 3 months than we did a year ago, but by no means does it mean we're in good shape. We're still deficit spending, and we will have one more difficult month to go before up tax collections start replenishing our general fund.
So the October 28th, well, the October 31st numbers should be our lowest number.
They will. Last year, I think the combined net of the four cash funds was $750,000, 760, something like that. So the first time in the last 9 years we've had a single month where our cash flow dips under $1 million. I think we'll be close to that for the end of this year.
I see our jailers here. One quick comment. Jailer Knight and I, and I think you and Judge Todd Jones, we've all individually had some very positive conversations about how to address the bail or the number of inmates that are on a low cash bail that can't seem to make their way out. And I think there's some help on the horizon. A, being able to monitor that number, and B, hopefully be able to improve those numbers, which will allow you then to sell those beds to the state. Okay, I'm done. I went over my 30 seconds.
All right,
We need to approve court order G then, because we pulled it out separate.
oh, okay.
So I would now move that we approve court order G, or the G from the consent agenda.
All right.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. And then we have a budget transfer.
It is ordered that the necessary cash transfers in the amount of $202,354.28 be made in order to pay county bills and payroll approved October 14, 2019.
So made.
Second.
And all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Accounts payable.
It is ordered to approve the vouchers claims register from September 23, 2019 to October 14, 2019 to show county bills in the amount of $681,081.84 were paid.
So made.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Let's see. And so we've already done the omitted property tax update, item 4. Item 5, any old business previously tabled that we need to talk about? I'm not aware of anything. And then the court orders not on the consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
It is ordered that McCracken County remain with its current government and business plan with Verizon Wireless, and that the judge executive is authorized to execute the necessary contract.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that McCracken County is authorized to enter into an interlocal agreement with the City of Paducah in support of the Edward Burns Memorial JAG grant application, with the Judge Executive authorized to enter into and execute said grant on behalf of the county. The city and the county agreed to allow the City of Paducah to submit the application, accept and administer the 2018 JAG award allocation in the amount of $11,280 on behalf of the Paducah Police Department to be used exclusively for the purchase of the grant allowable equipment.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that the McCracken County Clerk is authorized to apply for the Kentucky State Board of Elections MOA HAVA grant. The McCracken County Fiscal Court acknowledges that in order to receive the grant funds, the McCracken County Fiscal Court must initially purchase the equipment and then be reimbursed with grant funds. No monies will be spent above the award amount of the grant except for the shipping cost of the equipment.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that bid openings were held at 11 a.m. on September the 20th, 2019 at the McCracken County Jail for a commissary vendor for the period of November 1st, 2019 to November 1st, 2020. Bids were received from Kelwell, Caffey Group, Kimball's, and Carousel. The 4 bids were taken under advisement.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that the bid for a commissary vendor for the term of November 1st, 2019 through November 1st, 2020 be awarded to Kimball's Commissary.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion?
Was this the best bid?
Collectively, yes, sir, it was. Myself and my administrative staff sat down and went through each one of them. And this is actually the same company who has our kitchen as well. The scope company, Skillet, is owned by Kimball's, and so we went with them and felt it was the best decision for the jail. And I negotiated out some side details where we're going to make far more money than we have been.
And they'll bring revenue in, and that's discretionary funds for
Absolutely.
what you use to buy vehicles and things like that with.
Yes.
And this will be the best in the revenue generating category
It is.
overall. I know there's usually some that are higher, some are lower, but overall it's best.
Compared to what we currently have, it should at least double our revenue as far as commissary goes.
This money didn't go for vehicles. It did this year.
Actually, we have, when I started or took over this job, we had 10 vehicles. Only one of them had been purchased with tax dollars even before me. So it's been the standard is to buy these vehicles with commissary funds.
I think the law is you're supposed to use this funds to enhance the inmate.
And under
Health and
the
safety.
auditor's rules and the laws, that is, as long as we use them for prisoner transports and such, it is for the benefit of an inmate.
They don't have to walk. They get to ride.
So are all of our vehicles being purchased with this fund now?
Well, I've only purchased 2 since I've been in office, but that's been my intention since we don't really have it in the budget. So.
You have.
There's that.
You said you have 10 vehicles?
We had 10. I've got rid of 3 since I started.
So you're down to 7 vehicles?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you plan to replace the other 3, or you plan to keep it at 7?
I'm going to keep it at 7 for now, and if we need more, then I will, but right now I can maintain it with 7.
How many of those are, I know this doesn't have to do exactly with it, but how many of those are transport vehicles?
Every one of them have cages and are able to transport, and we use them, almost every day for transports, at one way or another.
Okay.
If you'd want, I can comment a little more on your budget deficit you were talking about earlier. The $4.4 million, I don't know where that number come from. I didn't set that, but if you'll compare our numbers to last year, we had $2.8 million is what we brought in on state. So we're projected at 3.5. We're actually $700,000 better than we were. So why it may not look good to you, the paper that you had, it's better than last year's by
Yeah.
a substantial amount.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're not doing a good job, I guess.
I understand.
My concern is our continued deficit spending, and once we put that 4.4, that's how we made the budget number work, and I guess that's in part my point is that we're not quite in, because that number is clearly not going to make that. I mean,
Right.
are you going to make
No, it's not.
4.4?
There's no way. I mean, I don't have enough space to do that.
But you're gonna be 700,000 better than what you were last year.
At least, and, it's not on the agenda, but, I mean, if you want to talk about it, I just signed another contract, a better negotiated contract with the feds. It took us we had 17 spots for them at $35 a day. We went up to 39 spots at $44 a day and increased our hourly reimbursement for running them back and forth to the doctor, the courthouse, wherever they go. So that's another $300,000 that we'll get as they add more federal inmates to us.
But that doesn't mean we're in better financial shape, it just means we got a better jailer.
Well,
and you're helping us.
I mean, instead of putting in $3 million last year, I mean, it'll be $2 million or less. Yeah, I mean, it saves $1 million or more.
So we are better. In the long run, you're gonna be better off.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, you're still deficit spending, right? I mean, you tell me when we're not.
Not as much, though.
That shouldn't be as much, but on my end, I don't know. I'll deal with the rest of it.
Thank you, Jailer.
Yes, sir.
And so, any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. Then we have ordinances, or just one ordinance, I guess.
An ordinance. It is hereby ordered that pursuant KRS Chapter 67, the reading of ordinance number 2019-12, Commonwealth of Kentucky, McCracken County Fiscal Court, an ordinance amending McCracken County Ordinance number 2019-5 by making revisions to the McCracken County Administrative Code pertaining to provisions in the following areas: paid periods and vacation leave. The present ordinance makes the following revisions to the McCracken County Administrative Code within Chapter 5 entitled Policies and Procedures. 1, modification of existing language in the section entitled Pay Period pertaining to the reoccurring pay period for McCracken County employees. And 2, modification of existing language in the section entitled Vacation regarding service time and the accumulation of vacation days in increment use. It is hereby certified in the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate official statement of the main points and the contents of ordinance number 2019-12. Ordinance number 2019-12 shall be available for public inspection in its whole and complete form in the McCracken County Judge Executive's office during ordinary business hours.
A motion?
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Wait, can we
You do.
discuss it?
Yeah, ask
Can we, yeah, I thought he was up here to.
Oh, there he
I was
is.
just
Yeah, sorry.
ready for questions if there were any.
The question I have, what changes were made to vacation? Can you explain what that was?
So our category currently tops off at 1.75 days once you get to 20 years. So with the advent of Tier 3, we're going to have employees staying a lot longer than we've had in the past. They would just retire out. In order to create a very minor incentive, I'm recommending we add a category at year 25 to pick up an extra quarter of a day a month, and that would even us out with who we compete with for positions in the community who have the same category.
You're wanting to keep your labor force.
I'm going to keep my labor force and give the people who have been here the longest amount of time an extra quarter day that they can accumulate. We still cap them at 40 hours. That's all they can carry over from year to year. It's a longevity reward, which I think will become more important for our Tier 3 employees that aren't going to stay for retirement. That's not going to be the primary thing that's going to keep them here. It's going to be a great health plan. I think we're making progress on that. and collection of other benefits. And we've been the max we've given heretofore was 1.75 days.
So they'll get two days a month vacation.
But they can only accumulate 40. They'll just get there, they'll get to 40 quicker.
So they can carry 40, it doesn't change that they carry 40 over from one year to the next.
Correct.
It doesn't accumulate. They can't carry 40 over this year and another 40 over and have 80, can they?
Right. They like to retire with 40 for obvious reasons, if they can. So they get a buyout then of those.
We had an issue before of somebody that had 200 days of accumulated vacation time.
Didn't help them. We were capped out.
They got paid for it. It was an assistant in the judge's office, the
there
previous
were
judge.
some, I believe that was a comp time issue that got settled, not
Okay.
a vacation time. We've addressed that too.
We've addressed that too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But and then I think, didn't we, said they created a minimum half hour of vacation time
Yeah.
is the least that can be taken in one
We've
swoop.
had some very small increments of vacation trying to be used for folks to patch over what essentially was showing up late. So minimum increment for usage will be a half hour.
Have you implemented the record-keeping procedure yet, that everything would come through the finance office?
That starts November 1st.
So you've got that too, where there'll be an accurate record kept in a central file for every employee, whether they're a sheriff's
Right,
office, clerk's
so
office.
heretofore, they did not report to us, except for at the time of retirement, what their leave balances were. So we're going to track that out of the treasurer's office, and that information will be reported on now their biweekly payroll. The request for the payroll change, I think I heard about that day one from both the sheriff and the jailer about the difficulty of we have this incredible lag time with our pay periods relative to our paydays. And our other problem is our pay periods start on a different day with every pay period. So we can have pay period this time start on Wednesday, next time start on Thursday, time after that Saturday. So this uniformly makes our pay periods, they start on a Sunday, in the first minute of Sunday, and go to the last minute of Saturday 2 weeks later, and then we will pay biweekly. And that's actually how we paid for since the early 2000s up until I think about 3 years ago.
So the vacation balance for the employee will be on the pay stub?
It'll be on their pay stub. All of their leave balances will be on their pay stub.
So beginning November 1st, the treasurer's office will get a timesheet from every department, every agency, right? And they haven't done that in the past.
We get timesheets now, but it just reflects whole time. It doesn't categorize them either of the ones that we get.
So now they'll be able to tell that this person, they get paid for the full week or full 2 weeks, but they had 2 vacation days within that.
Correct. We weren't centrally tracking that
And it'll be
before.
sick days too, right?
Correct.
Any other discussion? All in
Thank you.
favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Thank you, I'm
Carries.
sorry to delay that.
That's all right. We have no resolutions I'm aware of. We do have an executive session that we need to have a motion to.
I wanted to comment on one thing. I went to a conference in Washington a couple of weeks ago of local officials. There were about 15 or 20 from Kentucky went. And one of the issues that we discussed was medical costs in jails. And the National Association of County Officials, one of their priorities is to convince Congress to adopt a law that once someone is arrested and put in jail, if they're on Medicare or Medicaid, the benefits have to continue to pay rather than now when they lose those benefits when they come into jail. Because the discussion we had with a lot of counties, it's a major issue everywhere, that it's just costly for counties to have to pay those medical costs, because a lot of times the people come into jail have medical issues when they get there. So I'll keep in touch with you on the progress of that, and I volunteered if they needed any information, we would provide them a breakdown of what our costs are. And I talked about some of the programs you've started to help train employees or train jail inmates so they have a profession to go to when they get out of jail, and that the amount of money we're spending on, if we can save money on medical costs, hopefully we can implement more programs to prevent the recidivism, to have cooperation with companies where not only the welders, but maybe in some other areas. So I'll be in contact with you. It was a good conference, and hopefully there's some benefit from unifying all the states to get behind those kind of things.
Okay. All right, and then we need a motion for executive session. Let me see what this would be under proposed or pending litigation as permitted by KRS 61.8101C. Is there any other provision that meets it? Sam, is that it? I think that's it. So we have a motion here.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. So we'll go in executive session. We're not going to take any action, come back and take any action, I don't think, are we, Sam? No. So we'll just come right back in and adjourn afterwards. If you're wanting to get gone. I mean, we might.
I already told you. He's already told us who's making the motion in the second to adjourn. So.
She can get out of here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Good job.